everybody. I'm Dr. Scott.
Hi, and I'm Dr. Shiloh.
And this is LA Not So Confidential, the forensic psychology and true crime podcast.
Each week, we explore the intersection of psychology, the criminal justice system, and entertainment.
And today, due to request after request, our episode is a true crime documentary review on the curious case of Natalia Grace.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. How are you, Dr. Scott, after our London trip?
I'm great. I used my Stag's Breath honey mead whiskey and Prosecco for a cocktail last night. The little old lady at Edinburgh Castle wouldn't let me leave without forcing me to buy a bottle. It was well worth the purchase.
Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah. Well, can I come over and you make me a cocktail?
Please come over and drink with me. We're actually long overdue for that.
We really are.
It seems like the only time we're getting together is when we're out of town. That's crazy.
I know. Or like we do a lunch here and there, but we can't drink in the middle of a work day.
Well, we could, but we shouldn't.
That's true. That's true. Well, it's good to be back. Yes, this is our first recording since actually being back. And we did a live show yesterday, one of our live streams, and we couldn't rave enough about our experience in London. So we were telling our folks there, just if you have the time and the means and the wherewithal to attend this festival, well worth your time and money. We wouldn't steer you in the wrong direction. It has a very good vibe, and it was just had wonderful, wonderful speakers and people that you won't meet here necessarily at any of the festivals in the US. So
all of that, everything that you said, plus, we talked a lot yesterday. I won't go back into what we already covered yesterday, but we really thought very highly of the organization, the choice of speakers. There were some people that you would recognize from the U.S. We got to hang with our dear, dear friend, Jamie Gehring.
Yes.
Which was phenomenal and very timely and weirdly synchronous, because as you and I were presenting,
yes,
one of the last points we brought up was we did a version of our presentation on incels. We took basically a 3-hour presentation that we do for law enforcement, and we boiled it down to about 45 minutes, which was difficult in itself just to get everything in. And
we couldn't get everything in, so we were entertaining some questions afterwards. We got a great question that brought up this topic.
Right. So one of the things that we talk about in our wonderful previous collaboration with James Fitzgerald, a former special agent with the FBI, who was integral in finding the Unabomber. We talked about if Ted Kaczynski was active today, living on his own, even though he issued computers and technology, he really fit a lot of the criteria for being an incel. And there were some very wide-eyed looks in our audience, within seconds after my saying that. And a lot of people rushed up that Ted had passed away.
Right. They got the alerts on their phone right then and there.
It's very, very strange.
And then later that night, so of course, Jamie, having written the book about living next door to him, she was there at the festival. And then that night, there was a fire alarm that went off in the hotel. So 3 a.m. in the morning, Jamie and I are sitting on a couch in the lobby in our pajamas. And I'm like, so can we process this as we're waiting for the all clear? And she actually wrote, it's in the Huffington Post, a really touching, interesting article about, finding out about his death and grieving for the person that she grew up knowing and the conflictual feelings with all the harm he's done in this world. So it was a really...
But I'm going to even go out on a limb as far as CrimeCon UK and say that I would recommend it for people to go to. It was surprisingly affordable. In a fantastic environment. London was a blast. It was the height of tourist season.
Yeah.
There's a lot to do. There was a lot to do literally within a 10-minute walk of the hotel.
Oh, gosh.
And it was a great venue. Yeah. It was just really, really well done. So, I know that that's an expense for people, but talk about an intense, enjoyable, and manageable conference. Just can't say enough good things about it. So, yeah, there you go. So let me give a recap. Do we have any other housekeeping?
I don't think so.
Yeah, we're back. In episode 144, we presented you with a very interesting section of case presentations, and we entitled it Brutal Brothers and Sinister Sisters. We explored the concept of siblings that engage in the commission of horrific crimes of murder together. And there are a wide range of factors that can bring family members together in violence. So we covered the various theories around this phenomenon. We reviewed a few of the most egregious examples that included the murdering twins of Conyers, Georgia, the Wichita Horror Brothers, and the Irish Scissor Sisters. And yes, we also touched on the recent discussions about the Menendez brothers because they are back in the news.
Yes. Thanks to another documentary.
Yes.
But aside from our documentary today, anything that you've been watching or reading or consuming, listening to lately?
Well, no, again, just a lot of entertainment stuff. There's a great show I highly recommend called The Bear, which is about a restaurant. It's a show about a restaurant, and it's a fascinating character study. It's really great. It takes place in Philadelphia, I believe. Yeah, we're just like catching up on, more entertaining light stuff, which is a nice balance. What about you? What are you diving into right now?
On the airplane on the way back, I finished the last season of Barry, which had a very underwhelming finale. But, they all can't be perfect. And then I also started Perry Mason, which has been out for a couple of seasons. So I finished season 1 of Perry Mason, which is great. It has all the old vintage stuff that we talk about.
Oh, great.
The case from season 1 and then what it starts out with is kind of a take on the Miriam Parker case. And then like a version of Sister Amy is very involved as a character throughout the season. So it's a little slow, but I really like the characters in it. And I think all of the LA noirness is what's keeping me engaged. I'll probably watch season 2. And then I picked up a book at the Oxford prison, old prison and castle in London. That's Victorian Crimes A to Z. And it's just like maybe a few pages, little snippets on different people, different crimes in the Victorian era and like topics. I'm still in the A's, I believe. So like assassinations is in there. And it talks about Queen Victoria having 7 assassination attempts on her life. And it's really interesting so it talks about, it could be like a detective, it could be a perpetrator, it could be all these different people just kind of going through their names A to Z. So it's a fun little read to pick up and read a few pages each night.
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, so here we go. Let's
jump in.
Let's dive in. The Curious Case of Natalia Grace is our documentary this month, and it's an investigation discovery production. We watched it on Max. It's a 6-part docuseries with this IMDb synopsis. This docuseries offers extraordinary access and exclusive insight into a world-renowned mystery. Initially assumed to be a 6-year-old Ukrainian orphan with a rare bone growth disorder, she was actually a full-grown adult. Okay, so that's the synopsis, which is already leading.
Already misleading. Yes.
Super. Yeah. If you were to read that going into this, they've already duped you. So we'll just go with that.
Well, and we also kind of duped ourselves and started one of our Patreon members who asked us to cover this because you and I are used to covering things that are maybe 3 episodes. And we were like, fuck, this is 6 episodes.
Damn it. I know.
And then, what also makes it more difficult is within the first 10 minutes, as you're introduced to the main person you're following through this entire shenanigans, who is an intensely unlikable person.
Hang on. We'll get to our thoughts about him.
Okay. All right. So anyway, there is some Hollywood crossover here with the obvious choice of title. It's tipping its hat in a way to The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which was a fictionalized fantasy about a man who ages backwards, which is sadly about me. We don't like to talk about that. I think that this documentary got made only because there was the 2009 horror movie entitled Orphan.
Yep.
That movie is about a couple who loses their infant child. They adopt an orphan from Russia who turns out to be a 33-year-old psychopathic female from Estonia with a horribly murderous past.
Yeah.
And then there's a prequel that just came out last year, which is called Orphan First Kill.
Oh my God.
Literally the best tagline ever. There's something wrong with Esther. Speaking of which, Esther did not show up at CrimeCon UK.
How
so
dare you, Esther?
How very dare you, Missy?
You had your chance. No. So much so, okay, when this Natalia Grace documentary came out, I was like, oh, is this the story they made Orphan after? Not realizing that Orphan totally came first. I had to go back and look at the date, but it's definitely using that to their advantage here.
Oh, absolutely.
So the producers on this are Evan and Shannon Evangelista. They've done a couple of miniseries like reality TV, nothing notable that I'd heard of. And it has received an audience Rotten Tomatoes score of 67%.
Which is honestly, that's higher than
I'll say that's generous.
Would give it. Yeah, I think it's pretty generous. And with all, I respect anybody who's successful in any field, and good for Evan and Shannon. I don't know if I'll ever meet you. I don't know if they'll ever hire us for anything after
today.
We give our opinions on this.
Hey, it's wildly popular. I think it's the most.
Yeah, who are we? Best... Like, they don't give a shit about us.
No.
It's like everybody's talking about it. So,
it's the best
who are we?
Best rated docuseries that Investigative Discovery, I guess, has done, and everyone's talking about it, including us. So,
right,
yeah. So we'll kind of break this down by episode, but the story mostly takes place in Westfield, Indiana, and we're immediately introduced to the Barnett family. Michael and Christine were a couple married for about 15 years when this occurred, and only Michael participates in this documentary.
Right.
But they start with old footage that they seem to have gotten the rights to of some sort in these earlier episodes. But he is absolutely front and center. So I think this is a good, as you alluded to talk about our thoughts on Michael. So he's the father, the husband in this story. Huge reactions to him right off the bat. My husband walked in the room for 5 minutes and he's like, "Who is this ass clown?" That was literally his reaction.
Yeah.
Very animated, very wide-eyed. I think you were put off and uncomfortable with this person right away. What do you think?
Well, look, if someone is telling you a story, a good storyteller or someone who's expressing themselves finds narrative beats, and there's a rhythm to the way there's a rhythm to our conversation that is not about our speech patterns, but it's about the way we affectually present emotional content. And Michael starts on a 10-point scale. He starts at 15 and only goes up. Yeah. And it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. And, we'll get more into this later, but you come away from this whole series going, what the fuck did I just watch? Mm-hmm. I have no idea who's telling the truth. I do know everybody's lying. It's at least something. So, but even like your husband is saying, or is observing, is like 10 minutes in, you're like, this is not a reliable narrator at all.
Sure. Yeah. And I think I might even have made a note about this, but I felt like coming away from this as, this is like a case study on him, not Natalia Grace.
It really is. It really is.
So, he's very willing to lay out the family drama and the struggles and throw stones and throw blame. And by the end, by the 5th or 6th episode, you realize, this is someone that is terrified of going to prison and is really and it's sort of being filmed in real time once we get to the end of the court proceedings. So, that's always in the back of your head too. It's not like this is all resolved and now it's after the math.
There's a lot more that's probably going to come out over the years. I have no desire to cover it, but
and I hope it does, because
true. It sounds like, we'll offer some conjecture about what we think about the last episode, but I will say this, now that I've come out the gate talking about how uncomfortable I am with him as his presentation, you pointed out something about he's very willing to throw stones. There's another part of that too. He takes no responsibility for anything. He gives lip service to taking responsibility for the mistakes he's made, but they're always mistakes that he made are always contingent on somebody else's doing something. Yeah. I only did this because I should have done this, but I was powerless. And I want to, just because I want to be fair in the domain of domestic partner violence and IPV, that we don't even have accurate stats on men who are victims of IPV or emotional abuse by their partners, because men are much less likely to report it. And I came away by the end of this thinking, I actually do believe some of the things that he was putting out there about his relationship.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember is that the majority of the narrative is being told by Michael with very little cooperation on most of these incidents, which is tough because these are events that he's talking about that happen inside a house where a family can easily keep secrets, where there aren't other eyes watching. And it just, again, lends to you don't know what to believe, especially when, really one of the only other important people that could have a voice in this is Natalia, and she gets painted as a liar, which we'll get into, but we should move on.
Yeah. And that's very important for what you're saying, is that it's all inside the house. It's all told historically, and yet they're filming everything.
Yeah, I had a real
They're
problem
filming
with that.
every interaction with Natalia, which is quite disturbing. But, you know, he is very much into presentation, and he's very much into talking about everything that his family had. I mean, the family seems very well off. Kristen and Michael have 3 boys. They have their eldest son, Jacob, who is on the spectrum and is clearly a math genius. I mean, it's like there is absolutely no denying that this young man is quite gifted in this way. And a lot of their life revolves around Michael and his achievements, although you only ever really think maybe he's a vet. They really kind of avoid.
I don't know.
I think he's a veterinarian, but I'm not sure. I mean, we could probably find it on a search, but I'm just not going to put any more work into it.
Yeah, but they have a lot. They have invested a lot in their son Jacob's achievements as well.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah.
And a lot of their, I mean, I don't even know if they really have a social life, but clearly, like when they realize, and there are books written about their son, and their son is on the talk show circuit because of his genius. So, you know, that is really sort of a center point of their life. And they even open up a foundation for ASD families that includes a daycare, which is kind of amazing, like a daycare that presents with functional and appropriate containment and treatment for children on the spectrum, which is wonderful. I mean, it really seems like a remarkable family from the get-go. They've got privilege and they are highly invested in giving back. The only other core family member to participate in this entire narrative, though, is Jacob. And he is now an adult and living in his father Michael's basement. And this is a very, very different residential setting than the earlier things. The earlier things were McMahon, like Instagram perfection, everything perfect. And this is like a pretty shoddy house, not so much from the outside, but the inside it also looks like the production crew took down a lot of pictures. You see a lot of empty spaces on the wall with nails.
Yeah.
So I think maybe for purposes of confidentiality or that they didn't get permission, they had to take some things down.
Yeah. Maybe even they're renting some rooms in that house. You know,
could be.
They don't really say, but right. Yeah, Jacob is taking up residency in the basement of this home.
I think one of the things that's really, I admire him for taking part in doing what he can do. And he talks about some very difficult things through the production as well. And he's very open about the fact that this whole experience has kind of contributed to him regressing somewhat from where he was before. This is a kid that was a teen TEDx presenter, very successful, and he is definitely a few steps back from that. You know, it looks like almost they're kind of framing it as if maybe he peaked when he was 14 when he enrolled in this master's program. But also just a shit ton of people are interviewed in this documentary over 6 episodes. Way too many. Michael's mom and sister, neighbors, acquaintances. Some of it seems unnecessary or intentionally confusing, like the self-proclaimed nosy neighbor who really, she didn't have anything to say. There were other people that...
What are they doing spending so much time on her?
Right. I mean, I think some of the later stuff, they talk to the neighbors who have a reaction to being a neighbor to this supposedly adult. And you feel badly for them because at that point, the narrative is very negative towards Natalia, right? Because you think that she's the antagonist, and then later you're going, you know, even those neighbors are realizing, oh my God, this is what was really going on. So that frame I thought was pretty cool. I mean, we can't cover all these in depth, but it does seem like the doc tried to cover all the bases, but it just felt like, I guess it just left us feeling like they were grasping at straws at times.
Yeah, exactly. So at some point, the Barnetts decide to adopt a daughter to add to the family in 2010, and the adoption agency is in Florida, and they call with a little girl with dwarfism and basically say, you guys have 24 hours to decide. I have no idea if that's normal. Is that a thing? Like, take it or leave it?
That is not normal at all. No. This is another point too. Red flag, red flag that they all ignore. Yeah.
Yeah. So this adoption agency, even Michael says, like, we show up and it's kind of shady and
something like a strip mall. Like, you know, like in a crappy part of town.
Right.
With a very shady woman who's very demanding.
Yeah. All sorts of weird vibes. But anyway, the girl is named Natalia, and she has a Ukrainian birth certificate stating that she's 6 years old, born in 2003. And apparently she had been adopted, but those adoptive parents have changed their mind and are returning her, if you will. And according to Michael, they don't question that. They just kind of swoop in as these, playing the role of rescuers and say yes and decide to do it. So since they're in Florida, to me, this was pretty disturbing. And I don't know if other people really caught it, because after a while, I had to think about it. But, they think they're going to be these rescuers, adopt this girl. And then immediately while they're there, they do this big Disney trip with everyone, the three boys and this little girl. How zero awareness to how overwhelming this could be for a little girl who's a stranger, and they're strangers to her. I mean, I saw it as them wanting to sort of flex and be like, hey, check us out. What an amazing family we are to fold her in like this and give her the world. But I mean, I don't know. It just seems so off-putting.
It seems very performative and very non-respecting of Natalia's physical impairments. She has a very rare genetic disorder. It's a specific type of dwarfism. Right. She has even though she is very mobile and energetic, she does not have the same body distribution or limb length, and the entire world is geared towards people without these kind of disabilities. So I completely agree with you. I think that performative aspect is a red flag on their part, but it's also a red flag on returning a child. And it's one of the things that really pisses me off. And we're going to give an example later on, which is eerily similar about returning quote unquote problem children when there may be some challenges. You would expect a child that's been abandoned for any reason to have some challenging issues, but I think more so this is the problem is in the parents who are very focused on being rescuers and being seen as these loving, and many times there are a lot of religious people who do this, and frighteningly the number of them that return children is really concerning. So pretty quick after that Disney trip you're talking about, they get home and almost immediately there are some concerning indications allegedly that something is not right. And the first is that Christine is giving Natalia a bath for the first time, and allegedly Natalia has full pubic hair, and Michael hears this huge scream from the other room, Michael, and then he comes in and he sees it himself. However, this is one of the first things that is a number of contradictions, is Michael tells these stories about these things that he supposedly witnessed that he then contradicts later on. And this is one of them, one of a number of these types. And then following that, almost immediately, Mom Christine asserts that she has discovered Natalia has been stuffing their son's socks into her underwear to soak up her menstrual blood because she's experiencing menses.
Right.
And she's then throwing the socks out the window. Shady. All of it sounds weird. Well, I mean, besides the faking thing,
yes. I mean, it's weird. It's shady. Okay, the first time you're giving her a bath is when you come home, not when you finish your Disneyland trip. Okay. But also and then I pivot and I go, how horrific. What if she did oh my God, Michael, come look. How shaming is that to this child? Because
there could have been some hormonal issue going on for a child as young as 6, where it absolutely could have, right?
I do not care how old she is. She's obviously ashamed of this if she's hiding the fact that she has a period, which is just sad. I feel sad for her. Yeah, there's a few things that can happen. I mean, 6, if that was her true age, yes, is very young. There is a phenomenon that we call precocious puberty, when a child's body begins changing into that of an adult too soon. And that generally for girls is when that happens before the age of 8. I did a little bit of quick and dirty research. There is nothing that indicates that dwarfism triggers early puberty. So it doesn't seem to be related to that. However, what it got me thinking about was all of this research that's coming out post-pandemic about girls globally that are starting their periods earlier. And we know that chronic stress can trigger that. And that's why we're seeing something with a global issue happening to girls all around the world. So, it might be somewhat of a leap, but can we at least say that Natalia has probably had some pretty heavy stress in her life as a child, if not full-on trauma.
I agree. I want to offer something else as well that bolsters the strangeness of that particular incident is, Michael, as a highly expressive, emotive person, very reactive in his emotions. I will say, this is from me as a clinical perspective, I have noticed that highly reactive clients tend to perceive the world in an altered way. Mm-hmm. Someone could look at them and go, hey, I really don't like you leaving your dirty dishes in the sink. So just be an adult. Yeah. And wash your dishes and, help me out here. But what they hear is, you fucking piece of shit, you're leaving your goddamn dirty dishes in here again, and you're an awful person, and I hate. And then they perceive it differently, and they go, this person was screaming at me.
Yeah, true.
And I get that very strongly from him, that he just perceives being at the effect of the world all the time.
Sure. Makes sense.
So what's the third part? Now, as they get her medical evaluations, her doctor introduces her to another family with a 6-year-old girl who allegedly has the exact same condition. And the first thing that they notice is that there's very much a difference in their appearance. And I'm not a medical professional, but they do show video of the two of them sitting together, and there does look like there is an age difference.
Why?
How much of a difference?
Or what? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this was the first of many times that I asked myself, or was screaming at the TV, like, why does there not seem to be more medical investigation into her condition and the developmental issues, both biological and, physical and emotional?
Like a full battery.
Like,
get it all done.
Yes. Like, I don't know. And I felt like, okay, I'm not getting the full story here, because otherwise it just felt like the medical pediatric community, I don't know, like, were the resources not there? Or
is this part of the narrative that
exactly,
we're being fed by the documentary? Yes. Like, I don't know. But the next point that you wanted to hit, which is so spot on, is that she supposedly does not recognize the Ukrainian language, because the parents find out, oh, here's a person who speaks Ukrainian, and that she suddenly clammed up and she would not share any memories of the orphanage.
Right. And they're so shocked by this.
They're so shocked. Like
it's a trick.
This poor traumatized child, is refusing to talk in the native language, but they're assuming that she doesn't know it. They're immediately jumping to the fact that she doesn't know Ukrainian, but this could completely be a trauma response. Yeah. And also, if we are looking at that age of 6, if she is 6 years old, she could be chronologically 6 years old. She could be biologically 6 years old. She could still be emotionally 3 years old. Sure. That's a possibility. So how much can she actually remember given all these changes? And by the way, she just got dumped by another family.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I felt like that was a setup, almost like, let's find someone who speaks Ukrainian to see if she reacts to that. I don't know. It felt gross.
It felt very manipulative. And it all this takes a turn. Michael spins this as them feeling duped. You were just saying we as the audience feel duped. Right. And here's Michael going, no. We were duped and we're suspicious. Again, like you said, no finding any experts to help them determine what's going on here. It's so frustrating. And it's so relieving later on when there is an expert who is pushing back against an asshole attorney, of attorney.
Christine sure hired a guy, didn't she? Ugh.
She really did. She hired, well, interesting. We'll get to that. Okay. But I love that the doctor was like, yeah, I don't give a shit what you say.
Yeah.
And then the attorney's like, you're disrespecting me. Yeah. Like, oh, come on.
I know.
But anyway, at this point, the narrative just completely turns on its heel, and it's doing nothing but vilifying Natalia. Michael's talking about her dark side coming out, about her intentionally soiling her pants, personally wiping fecal material and urine on her siblings and blood, her attempting to cause mental distress to the family, like jumping out of a car, throwing their toys in the street, like framing it in this sinister way, like she was trying to get them to run into the road.
It doesn't help, like the slow reenactments of a child dropping toys in the
dropping street. A toy in the street, right? I immediately thought, if this was happening and this child is experiencing something, she has very limited arm length and dexterity. So they're saying that she's intentionally wiping fecal matter on their beds. It's like, well, is anybody assisting her in going to the bathroom? Has she been taught hygiene? Does she know? So there's this whole idea, everything is framed as if it's intentional. And developmentally, it's totally appropriate for kids to be destroying their siblings' toys. Like, there's nothing out of the ordinary for that. Right?
They have 3 boys. I'm sure that happened a bit with the other kids.
Exactly. So supposedly she was caught hiding knives from the kitchen under her bed. And Michael questions her and she replies, "I'm going to kill you in your sleep." Okay, so this all sounds super creepy at first glance, especially the way it's framed for this doc with like these slow reenactments. And I mean, I'll tell you the thing that hurts me, here I'm saying hurts me, but affects me, is the footage they use of her. And there's a lot of it, but it's also 6 episodes, so they repeat it. She looks so distressed. She looks like a child that is wildly distressed and is trying to be stoic.
Oh my God, I know.
Which is such a trauma response. That's such a trauma response.
Hard to watch. Those big eyes looking up at you, because a lot of the footage is taken from like standing, looming over her. But you're right, like almost like her arms are just at her side, like she is buzzing inside. And yeah, I mean, I'll offer not an alternative, but just an interesting note that actually one of our listeners wrote in about asking us to do this documentary. And I think she made a great observation about the documentary, but also highlighting some of this behavior that we're starting to see from the parents is something that's known as Cinderella syndrome, where abusive parents target one child, usually a stepchild or an adopted child, with the one who does all the chores, receives all the punishments. And there's like this lack of affection towards that one targeted, singled out kid. And I thought that had some merit to it. I mean, it really got me wondering as we learn more about this seemingly being an abusive household, that Natalia was just an easy target for all of this.
I think that there's some merit to that. Michael, there's one thing that Michael expands on coming home from work, and Christine would be punishing Natalia over and over again with what would be an appropriate level of punishment for someone her age, which is, nose to the wall for doing something, except Natalia has severe body differences. And if she was basically she was forced to stand in stress positions.
Yes.
If this is accurate, if what we're watching on these episodes is accurate. And
right, because this is videotaped. This is videotaped, yeah.
This is videotape. We're watching this videotape. But Michael is also saying that he's coming in and out of the house 3 times a day, and she's always being punished with her nose against the wall. So he's implying that she's there for very long periods of time. Don't know if that's true. If it is, that's abuse. That's just clear abuse, because her spine is absolutely twisted. Like there's an S curve in this child's spine. No, but even though this is a documentary review, we do need to talk about the research and give a little recap on what's out there about adoptive children behavior problems. We cannot paint all adopted children with one broad brush. That's not fair. It's just like any other population. There's outliers and there's some commonalities. All of them have individualized behaviors and needs. However, the difference is that some of these behaviors are learned and shaped in institutionalized living or in settings in their country of origin. And there's wild differences around the world in how orphanages are run because they have very different views of children. Not saying that the U.S. is rah, has the highest standard. We don't. We need to have a higher standard. But children who are adopted may have behavioral issues such as violent tantrums or sensory self-stimulation needs in times of stress or excitement. And these kids can exhibit oppositional behaviors, aggression, depression, and anxiety. And they can even go so far as beyond oppositional into what we would call conduct disordered actions, which means that they go a step further than being opposing to authority. They go to the step of violating the rights of the people around them. However, they're children and they don't have a full understanding of the rights, the interpersonal rights of the people around them. So cultural differences may also affect a child's behavior in ways that may not be understood fully by the adopted family. And research shows us that children coming from institutional settings may have a difficult time understanding emotions in others because they've been in a rarefied echo chamber of interpersonal relationships. And it can be wildly disturbing for them to be moved into this supposedly happy, shiny household when they don't know the emotional vocabulary. They don't know how to speak that language, right? Because their learned behaviors were adaptive in an orphanage or other environments that may well have been very maladaptive or inappropriate. So again, it's not only Ukrainian to English, it's institutionalized to non-institutionalized.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that lack of understanding emotions in others, we can talk about this as a known part of the research. And then here we have this documentary that's later going to have that sort of twisted into her being this little psychopath.
Allegedly.
Interesting. Yeah. So, yeah, many adopted children suffer from trauma as well as a result of experiences such as abandonment and or other experiences from their orphanage or foster settings. And understanding the causes of behavioral issues post-adoption is critical for helping the child and their new family through this period of adjustment. Therefore, really, each adopted child and family would absolutely benefit from individualized assessment, support from education services, therapy, having a team of social workers around them, and those that specialize in adoptive children, not just children, because we're talking about so many other layers of needs that are very, very specific. It's also noted that behavioral strategies used for biological children may not be appropriate for a child with a history of childhood trauma and adoption. So, I think there's a lot we can reflect on here, just looking at you can't just bring a child into your home and think, I know how to raise kids. And it's the same thing.
Well, absolutely. No, I'm glad you said that, because that to me is the drive that so many of these families come in with, well, I'm already well versed in how to do this. Of course, why wouldn't I? And I'm saying that as somebody, I have cousins who adopted, after raising their own kids, adopted more kids, and they are phenomenal parents. They are phenomenal. And they've, they're wonderful examples of people out there who successfully do this. But I don't know, there's a wide range as well. And it seems like we should be able as a culture to try and narrow down the options of people who really aren't suited to doing this. But look, there's a lot to consider here in terms of psych issues regarding attachment forms. Attachment, we've talked about it in context of other episodes. It's the process by which infants and toddlers learn to connect and then later develop what are called reciprocal, affectionate, and binding relationships, not only with their caregivers and their parents, but with other people around them. And it really influences the way a child relates to the world and forms relationships throughout their entire life. So infants will develop secure attachment when their needs are met and trust developments. Doesn't mean that the parents have to be absolutely 100% perfect, but when they get their needs met and there's a trust that develops at the infant level of development.
Right.
I mean, very, very important, because when an infant's needs are not met, it is possible for a disordered attachment to result. So the first several years of life are really the most important and yet the most vulnerable time for development of attachment. So there's a spectrum of attachment ranging from securely attached to insecurely attached to poorly attached. And difficulties with attachment can really be lifelong challenges and keep therapists in business, really, because it can not only result in difficulty forming relationships, but can also impact the individual's ability to self-regulate, control their impulses, control their reactivity, and their ability to understand the emotions of those around them and then respond in an appropriate manner.
Yeah. So it's important to understand the process of attachment and the ways to facilitate healthy attachment after adoption. And in Natalia's case, again, if you think you've raised biological children just fine, and then you get a 6-year-old with an unknown past, and you think that you're going to just jump in and raise her the same way without giving two thoughts to what could be going on underneath, I think it's a pretty naive or egotistical way to go about this. And then when it doesn't start going so well, God forbid you blame yourselves, right?
Right.
All right. So moving on to this point that we just kind of touched on, and deep breaths here, Dr. Scott. So I know this.
Getting centered.
We've already chatted about this offline. But so Michael says that they take her to get a mental evaluation and that she gets diagnosed as a sociopath. And the evaluator tells them there's nothing you can do and you are in danger. Basically, he frames it that that's all they're left with.
Right. But Shiloh, the way you just said it, was literally on a 10-point scale, you were at 3. And the way he says it was at 15. Because he's just enormous, wide eyes. Everything is talking like this. And she told us there's nothing you can do. And you are in danger.
Okay,
seriously,
bye, thanks.
right?
Get out of my office.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye. Pay me.
So it's like, this is, kind of this bombshell of like, we have this evil child, right? He goes on to describe incidents where then they find her standing at the foot of the bed with a knife in her hand, where they describe this like manipulative plan where, she sweetly comes in and asks Christine, may I help you with the dishes, please, Mummy? And, oh, well, yeah, sure. And then she gets up to do the dishes and they see her pouring a bottle of Pledge into Christine's coffee. And Michael says that she admits when they say, what are you doing, Natalia? That she says, oh, I'm trying to poison you. Just nonchalant. She turns into the BTK all of a sudden, no affect, just talking about her plans to murder all of
Right. But one of the problems here is that, again, Michael is telling the story. And as you find out many times throughout these episodes, he will say that he was present. And then he'll later say, oh, no, I wasn't there. That's what Christine told me happened.
He removes himself.
There's some logistical things here that are problematic. Again, Natalia has significant physical impairments. So we're supposed to believe that she crawled up on top of a chair to be able to access the sink and dry dishes for mom, and somehow sequestered a bottle of Pledge. And then quickly, with her very limited hand dexterity, which they talk about a lot, she unscrews the bottle. I mean, none of it makes any sense. None of it makes any sense. I did want to touch on, you and I talked about this earlier, because I remember us when we were in the internship and it was like a slow day or something. And somebody had sent me a link, said, you should listen to this documentary on YouTube entitled Child of Rage. Anybody that's out there listening, I really, really highly recommend you watch Child of Rage. It's very informative. It's all about attachment issues. It's the story of what was thought to be a child psychopath because she actually was trying to endanger her toddler siblings, was adopted and dumped by a religious family that couldn't handle her and thought that they could pray away the behaviors. What emerges later in the story of this child in Child of Rage is that she and her 2 siblings were horrifically abused and neglected by their parents. Her younger sibling so much that the child had been left on his back in a crib for so long that there was brain damage because the skull was not given the opportunity to form. So in this story, in Child of Rage, what you find out later on, if you do a dive and read follow-up pages, is that they got, after she was returned by the family that was wildly inept and unable to care for her, they get her to an attachment specialist and an entire protocol. And this is from like the early 80s.
Oh, yeah.
This is not recent. They do an entire treatment residential protocol of really containing and creating an environment where she knows that she's safe. And incrementally, the behaviors start to go away. And this is not an easy program. This is one of those programs where your caregiver, you're sitting, touching skin to skin for hours a day. And there are times, like for days at a time, where the only time where you don't have physical contact is when one person is going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
But there's research behind this that shows that it works. And apparently this child is now like a nurse.
She's like a pediatric nurse,
she's
right?
a pediatric nurse. And her identity has been changed because It's really disturbing to hear her interview, because you're seeing this sweet, angelic little child talking about the plans that she made to kill people.
Yeah.
And she's dead serious about it. But that's what I would rather people watch than something like this, because it's validated. It's a legit story. There's hope, as opposed to like this mishmash of a documentary series where you're like, what are we watching? What is going on?
No, totally worth bringing up. And the YouTube link is in the show notes for you guys. But I would say, like, again, we're still on episode 1 here. Fuck, I know. But I swear we're wrapping it up. But throughout this episode, again, just to harken back to the video footage of Christine filming Natalia when punishing her or interrogating her, even about like the menstruation issue. They're asking her, or like, why is she hiding that? And very strange, very demeaning, incredibly shaming. It feels abusive. And I feel like this is probably the best window into Christine's treatment of Natalia that we get, because Christine does not participate in this documentary except for one snarky quote at the end that she gives them. But yeah, I was just left with like, I hate the fact that, you know, this took place and I'm watching it right now. So
yeah. Well, one thing before we move on, I did want to say, and this is, you know, as annoying as I find Michael, I want him to be a reliable narrator, and he lets me down over and over again. You know, and maybe other people would have a different reaction where they don't give a shit about him. I keep going, why won't you be straightforward with us? But now, is it possible that the social worker or MFT or psychologist came out and said your child is a psychopath? It's possible. It is highly, highly unlikely, because that's one of the rules of diagnosis, is we do not diagnose personality disorders in individuals under the age of 18. We just don't do it. Like that's not done.
Yeah. Well, and it's not a diagnosis anyway. And I get it. I don't expect Michael to know what's a diagnosis and what isn't. And if they just discussed these traits, that might be what he's trying to get across. But
or a conduct disorder, you know, like conduct disorder. And then maybe like, hey, you know, if the child is sequestering knives, you guys need to be careful, and here's some of the things. But the way he frames it is like, it's almost like we were directed to lock her in her room every night. It's like there's a protocol for determining the level of risk that the child is presenting in the home. And he's just, as per usual, he's skipping over all of that stuff. Episode 2. So after,
and we promise it'll move quicker. We just had to lay a lot of foundation.
I'm going to shut up. I swear to you guys, I'm going to shut up. So in episode 2, Michael claims that Natalia tried to kill Christine by pulling her, a full-grown woman, dragging her into an electric fence while visiting a farm. And oh my God, the name of the farm. Do you remember the name of the farm?
I don't. I remember I giggled, but what is it?
Traders Point Creamery. Ew. And I keep saying Traders Point Creamery, and I just kept laughing like it's the Traders Point Creamery incident.
Man.
So basically, like, and this is another thing. Michael said, well, me and the boys, you know, she couldn't move as fast, so Christine stays with her, and we're 1.25 miles away. What the fuck are you doing? Like, the cows are not 1.25 miles away from taking your kids to milk them. That is such bullshit. So anyway, Christine screams, and apparently he can hear the scream from 1.5 miles away, or hears the sirens, and she's called the cops to have them 5150 Natalia. So again, another Michael's interpretation of what Christine has allegedly
This
said.
feels like a total setup, right? Like, hey, I'm going to lag behind with her. You go ahead with the boys. And then there's going to be this incident and we'll get her 5150.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but that's what I came away from with all of this.
It does. It feels like especially later on, there's a payoff for that as well. Natalia is taken to what's called the stress center, and it's an inpatient treatment facility. And she's kept for, I think, several days. I don't know if it's a full week, but they have anonymous interviews with staff talking about how adult she was acting, how she was propositioning male staff and other patients. But it's also framed as if she's lying about her age, instead of framing it as possibly a child who has been over-sexualized and abused.
Totally. Yeah. At this point, I was like, okay, maybe she might be somewhat older than her stated age, you know, not 6, but, you know, maybe a little bit. And then, you know, she gets put into this totally different environment. And if she felt like she couldn't be herself with the Barnetts, maybe she feels a little free to be herself around strangers. I don't know. And with stranger men. So now I'm thinking, God, has she had to engage in sex work in
she's
some
been
part of her
trafficked
history.
before.
Yeah, like at the very least sexually abused. And why the fuck is she in an environment with adults? Like how? I'm so confused about all of this.
But then she also gets just charged because of the behavior.
Yeah, they're like, well, we can't have this in here. Bye. Like,
oh yeah, you're on hold, but you're not. Like what? No, it's so many things are.
I know.
Weird.
Yeah. So the family is very unsure what to do at this point. Which, if there wasn't so much weird shit going on like if this was just a non-abusive family with a child for some, with some serious concerns that they don't know about, I would feel really bad for them. Definitely. Like if you just don't know where to turn,
right.
None of the professionals are being helpful. That could be a really isolating and helpless feeling to know what to do or where to turn to. But it's just a big but. Like I could see that being really scary, but this goes in a whole different direction.
Well, moving on. Someone, possibly a neighbor, calls in a neglect report to DCS, or they call it DCS out here in California. We call it DCFS. And the police end up responding to their household to follow up. And one particular detective ends up taking a real interest in this case. And he goes as far as finding Natalia's naturalization papers from Ukraine that are suggesting that she's older. Mm-hmm. And then he supposedly advises the Barnetts to correct her age with an attorney.
Yeah.
So that all feels fishy, but
it does.
It's very weird. And police at this point also discover a documented criminal history, domestic violence in the Barnett home with reports from neighbors of them arguing in the yard. I felt like that was really a red herring.
Yeah,
because it's like even Michael goes, that was a long time ago. And I think it's, is it optimal? Can you have a healthy relationship without ever screaming at each other and calling the police? You absolutely can.
Sure.
But it seems like if it's one incident from decades ago, that doesn't seem particularly germane to what's going on right now.
Yeah, I thought, the detective finding this conflicting paperwork, again, I could see this being conflated of like what advice he offered. A lot of times, I don't think law enforcement understands the power that one little sentence can have that people glob onto. Yep. So, to make a casual suggestion of like, hey, you might want to look into this with your attorney. Like, I don't know. Maybe you can have this legally corrected. Oh, okay. Cop said we should do this. And like, it felt like an out for them. I could see that happening, but that's a legal area that isn't
It is. And this is total conjecture on my part. I do think probably there is a little bit of her age is off, but I don't think it's more than 2.5 years. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I think she might've been a couple of years older. And then because of her whatever she experienced, she likely doesn't know, but they go wildly over the top with this pursuit of the age change. Like to me, it's the most shocking thing. Everything else is all like conjecture and fluff and accusations. This decision by the judge to me is wild.
So at the beginning of episode 2, we're basically 2 years after Natalia has been adopted. The Barnetts indeed get an attorney to file to get her age and birth date changed to 1989, which would put her at 22 years old instead of 8 or 9, which she would be at that point if that's 2 years after they adopted her. It's very sketchy as to what medical experts gave their opinion because the documentary just kind of jumps around so much, grabbing interviews and footage from different years that, like you said, this is just very confusing and it almost feels deliberate. But basically what a judge decided to do is, she's now magically 22 years old. And as the legal expert that they have on here giving some commentary explains that the judge said something like, okay, so, if she hasn't grown in like 4 years, you stop growing at 18. So, okay, that would make her 22. And if a judge had that much power to do that, that's insane.
And very good point. This attorney, to me, is the only reliable person in the entire.
She's in a bunch of stuff. Like she's done true crime stuff before.
She's fantastic.
Yeah. She's pretty clear cut. No bullshit.
She's also like the one who seems to be waving their hands going, this is all messed up. Like everybody involved in this is completely messed up. Yeah. I love that she does that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know they just sat her down with this case file and was like, give us your thoughts, but she's not afraid to talk about that. So what do? they're like, okay, you're 22. We're going to get you an apartment of your own. And they just kind of drop her off, check on her every once in a while. And she's basically at this point considered a disabled adult, receiving some social service benefits, still needing some level of care from her parents. But yeah, they find this nice apartment, like single level apartment in a nice, cute little neighborhood. And there you go.
Well, they gloss over something that actually is way more complex. Once that was established that she's an adult, they go full bear and get her disability benefits, which she now can fully qualify for. They get her SNAP card, and they're a family of means, so they can also supplement it. But they're also the payees. That becomes very clear, is that Michael is receiving that money. And what you get very quickly is you get feedback from the neighbors.
Yeah.
And I was glad that they came back to the neighbors later on when the neighbors realize much later what has happened. Allegedly, Christine has drilled it into Natalia's head that every time she meets somebody, she has to say, I know I look young. I'm actually 22.
Oh, right.
Everybody that she meets, they're going, oh, this person is differently abled. So they're seeing her as an adult, and quickly the tables change. Like, she's calling us all the time. She's coming into our house. She's going through my refrigerator and eating, and everybody's really annoyed. Like, these people that first were very patient with her are now really annoyed by it, not realizing that those are all age appropriate actions for a child that would have been abandoned, basically.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe she's not 6. Yeah. Maybe she's really only chronologically, maybe she's 9.5 years old, but emotionally she's much younger. Of course she's going to be eating. I mean, all the behaviors they describe are completely understandable from a trauma perspective.
Of course, kids want snacks all day long.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if they're bored. What else? She's not doing anything.
They give her no stimulation at all. Nothing. Like there's a TV, and like even there's a couple of times again, Christine's fucking filming everything.
Christine and Michael.
Here she is curled up on a couch, like just blank faced, curled up in a blanket. Well, what have you been doing? Nothing. Like they're just so accusatory. But there's interviews with the neighbors. There's a sweet older woman, and she was one of the ones that watched Christine drop Natalia off with some groceries, and then she witnesses Christine sitting in her car as Natalia is struggling to drag all these groceries inside. And another male neighbor was interviewed about how she would play with his grandson as a child and had the maturity of an older person, and then told him in that rote voice that she was in her 20s.
Yeah.
But then they all kind of come back and they talk about, like, she definitely had some hygiene issues. She would wear the same clothes for days on end. She would be dressed inappropriately for the weather, and that she really did smell. She had not been bathed in a long time. Yeah.
So, I mean, let's say this is an adult, a disabled adult. Shouldn't there be some social services giving her like basic life skills, maybe going, and I know later she does end up going to like an adult,
like in a day program.
Yeah, a day program, because that's in her next apartment. But I feel like she's also slipping through these social services cracks too, for too long. I mean, eventually, but
you also get the feeling, although it's not stated implicitly, you also get the feeling, well, no, it is actually pretty implicit from the texts. And there are a lot of texts between Michael and Christine. They want to limit her ability to contact people. They keep coming in and wiping her contacts
out of her phone. Yeah.
So I think that there's definitely a vested interest in Natalia not having access to other people. I think they might have been curtailing that, isolating her. Yeah.
So they also have these interviews with this younger couple that lives across the street, which for some reason they cue this weird like sitcom music. There is a weird soundtrack to this.
What was that?
I'm like, what is happening?
That was really strange.
But they seem like really good people. They're empathetic to her, like you said, like very tolerant of what ends up becoming this, in their eyes, this really clingy behavior by Natalia. They're saying like it's giving them, making them uncomfortable, but you could tell she's incredibly lonely. And to some extent, they're like, we get that. Like she has nobody, but they're saying, she was a pest to everyone, would, like you said, wander into other people's apartments and text them all day to like see when they're going to be home again. Really like this desperation to be around and communicating with people. Right. And, he had to set boundaries with her at some point, which, given the information he knew, totally appropriate, right? But he starts saying these hypotheticals like, what if someone breaks up with her? Like if they're in a relationship, or, I feel like if I cut ties altogether with my family, if I have to take these boundaries further, what's next? Is she gonna be standing over me with a knife? Kind of this like fatal attraction narrative that they're also contributing to. And you just don't know because, okay, do they know the story on the back end? What are producers sort of trying to get out of them? But it's just interesting. But she does end up, according to some of these folks, being somewhat inappropriate with male children. And of course, they're seeing it as this adult being inappropriate or trying to, have some sexual touching or sexual play with kids who are like 9 years old. So, but at some point, it shows them like looking out the window and like, you just don't want to interact with her because she'll stop you. And the quote was, having Natalia living by you is like a Hitchcock movie, like they all were kept captive in their house because of this weird neighbor.
True. And you can't help but wonder, what information were they given by Michael and Christine? Where does this knife stuff come in? Like, were they all primed to think of her as a dangerous adult living on her own? And she had also been answering questions. They would say, well, what happened? Well, I pulled a knife and I threatened to kill my mom and dad.
Right.
So all of it, again, just seems very, very strange again. And there is this implication that Christine had really threatened her. Like, if you want to eat, if you want this apartment, this is the way you answer these questions. That was what I felt like came from it. So DCS starts a new investigation with the same investigator after neighbors call in concerns about her not being able to care for herself. This was in regards to the hygiene issues. And Michael comes to the apartment, again, filming her while like interrogating her.
The second she opens the door, he's got that camera on.
Right. Interrogating her about that interview. And he's really inappropriately snarky. He's in being a complete asshole.
Yeah, he's a jerk.
Yeah. And that ends really quickly because as far as he's concerned, she's an adult and DCS has no jurisdiction over an adult.
They can't do much.
But Adult Protective Services could. And there's got to be a version of that. But that doesn't get addressed here. But there are some other concerning behaviors, like you were saying, that were, at least they appear to be documented by some of these third parties that are interviewed. Natalia calls 911 one night and she said that she was stalking her neighbors and she was afraid of what she might do. So that is framed as homicidal ideation.
Right.
And then there's also reports that she was sexually propositioning men in the complex. I just want to say again, none of these behaviors indicate that she's actually an adult. None of them.
Totally.
All of these could be trauma responses. One of the things that you will find is after people are hospitalized, especially young people, they pick up a lot of habits after being in the hospital. Because usually they're surrounded by other people who have been hospitalized a lot, who are more than willing to share their tips and tricks. I'll also say that because in my day job, I work with what we call here in Southern California, we call them high utilizers of public services, that there are a lot of people, especially that are serviced by our regional centers, which for people with developmental disabilities, they form relationships with emergency services. And if they feel lonely and disconnected, they will make a 911 call and they will assert suicidality. They'll assert homicidality because they know that it means somebody's going to come out and talk to them and maybe even take them to the hospital for a couple of days or take them to the police station. And it's about connection. Yeah. It's not the best use of services, but it's an adaptive behavior that is not serving anyone in the long run. But what happens is I think that all of this is framed as if she's a psychopathic adult and the apartment gets rid of her. They don't allow Michael and Christine to renew her lease. So they find her a new apartment in a completely different town because they've decided they're going to move to Canada.
Right.
For their son. This all seems so sketchy, and it's in another town. It's in a really shady part of town, and it's on the fucking second floor.
Yeah.
So, and this is, again, if you don't see this young woman has really short, deformed legs. And, you know, she's had multiple surgeries. She's still, like, the idea of her climbing up or even attempting to carry anything up a flight of stairs is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And this is around 2013. So given the dates,
Sure.
Natalia is either 10 years old, or as Michael points out over and over again, as this asshole attorney points out over and over again, is that it doesn't matter what you say, doctor. She's 24 years old because the judge said she's 24 years old.
Yep.
Which is really frightening.
I mean, really, to look back on it, as you're watching this, you're kind of like all over the place and numb by episode 3. But to look back and go, holy shit, she could have been a 10-year-old living in that apartment by herself. And now she's dumped in this horrible high crime neighborhood as a 10-year-old. It just, oh my God. So Natalia's living in this new place. Again, high crime area, dangerous living conditions for her disability. And we're introduced to a new neighbor, which I love this woman. She's my favorite. She's the one with, as she said, you know, she's like holding a baby and she's like, yeah, I have like, I don't know, however many kids, tons of pets.
I think she has 5 kids.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And great Halloween decorations too.
Great,
yes. Really good Halloween decorations.
Like tons of tattoos. Like, I just want to hang out with this woman. She's such a straight shooter, a wall full covered with crosses, but just no bullshit, with a really strong moral compass. You know, you see her and you're like, oh man, like this woman probably kicked my ass, but she knows what's right and she doesn't give a shit who's trying to.
She's got a bullshit meter that is very finely tuned. It's very clear. You know, another one that's just seeing through the truth of what's going on.
So she, you know, of course, notices Natalia move in and has some commentary about that. And then later down the line, she ends up being a witness for some of the legal proceedings and involved in some of these recorded depositions that we see. And there's not a ton to say about her. I just love her, the way that she pushes back and is, again, like not taking any shit from these attorneys that are really trying to be assholes and get her to say what they want her to say. But she's great. I'm sorry, I didn't write down her name and I don't remember her, but she's a really cool character. Anyway, so Natalia goes missing. Basically, at this point, she was enrolled in adult day center, and I think actually had her working on her GED.
Right. I think that was the point of that as well.
Yeah. And so they call Christine and Michael to say that she hasn't been there and she's just MIA because no one has eyes on her because they moved to Canada because their son was enrolling in that master's program up there. So the whole family's up there. And by the time they do locate her, this other woman named Cynthia has taken her in. She has, at first you're like, oh God, what's going on here? Because she says, I saw this essentially to me, what is a child in need? She starts taking her food stamps and her social security payments are now going to this other woman. I don't know how Natalia was able to do that, but she's an adult.
Well, she's an adult, so she can go to Social Security and say, I want this person to be my payee. I don't want Michael to be my payee.
Yeah. So that switched around and
Which is also shady. It happens very quickly. It happens very, very quickly.
Yeah, it happens quickly. And we also know that people just take advantage of people in these circumstances. But not only are they doing that, they bring Natalia in and then they start renting out her other place to someone. So they're like making money on Michael and Christine's apartment. So she gets evicted eventually because they figure out what's going on. But we learn like they've really taken her in, cared for her needs, and they seem to be a couple that saw something that wasn't right and they actually did something about it and started treating Natalia like a person.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I have to say her responses to, because the police get involved and are like, what are you doing? She's like, yeah, I'm making her dinner. I'm making sure she's clean. Like, she's kind of a no bullshit person too, but there's also that like sketchy, like, we've also got a grift going here too.
Yeah, but I think so. I mean,
they also show up to court with her.
Long term, like years later. Yeah, exactly. So they try to petition to actually adopt Natalia. And I think they had still been trying to get legal guardianship after all these years have gone by. But Natalia ends up living with them for 5 years. I mean, it takes us all the way up to really 2022 when this documentary ends.
Yeah. So the Barnetts must be thrilled about this. Somebody else is handling their problem, right? But there's trouble in paradise. They divorce, which you could have seen that coming.
Oh my God.
Like, how do they even last this long? Michael moves back to Indiana and Christine is still in Canada with the boys. And now really things are coming full circle and they're going to have to both start facing the music for their actions with Natalia, because there's a lot of questioning about what was really the motivation behind getting that age change. And some things come up. This is actually one of the twists really in the plot where you're like, oh, okay, this actually is kind of interesting. So Michael and Christine get charged with 2 counts of child neglect in Indiana in 2019. And they both turn themselves in to be, fingerprinted. They're both quickly released. And through more interviews specifically made for this documentary, Michael maintains that Christine had all the power in the relationship and made all the decisions. And this quickly takes on really vibes of The Staircase, in that the doc starts to focus on Michael's upcoming trial. And now the narrative in very emotional terms is that Christine was this insane, domineering, malignant narcissist who was abusing all of them. And I say that very carefully because if only a third of this was true, she is a very problematic individual. It's clear. She's got some real issues. Whereas Michael is annoying, Christine is somebody that, like, it's very clear something's wrong with her. And he recounts abuse again through his lens, including an incident that is on video. And Natalia's nose is on the wall. Liz, I was talking about this before. There's a video of it. And so she's got her in a stress position, especially it's a stress position for this disabled young woman. And she is being interrogated by Christine. Interrogated. Christine is making her sit in soiled pants. You can see at one point in this video that she does have what appears to be a fecal stain on the back of her t-shirt. And he claims that he witnessed Christina beating Natalia. Michael goes on to claim that he witnessed Christina beating Natalia, and he reenacts Christina's actions, which is like violent pounding on the floor in a kneeling position to the point where he hurts his own knuckles. Now, it is very over the top.
Oh my.
She would have actually probably have been hospitalized. If that was accurate, Natalia would have been hospitalized with that level of violence. So that seems sketchy.
This is just dawning on me now, and because you mentioned like The Staircase and another Michael Peterson in that case, but I wonder if this Michael's attorneys actually like proposed a documentary be made, because there's the footage, all the past footage of Michael's other interviews.
Totally possible.
Like, how about in real time we get this sort of made so you can follow like the court proceedings and all of that, a la The Staircase. I don't know if they thought it would help or not, but I just wonder if they reached out to try to get someone to do something like this. I mean, and this scene where he's reenacting it, he's literally like, okay, you guys are gonna have to put the cameras there to get this. Like, you got it? Okay. Am I in the frame? Okay. Because I'm gonna and he starts getting down on the floor to show this beating.
Stupid.
Oh, well, I know. So Jacob, the adult son that's living with Michael when they move back.
He's the young man with ASD, which is important to discern here because Michael does not have any contact with his other children. They're younger, but Jacob is now an adult and he has chosen to come live with Michael. And there's a lot of implications that Jacob is not buying his mom's bullshit anymore. He's had to leave his mom because of it's very careful how they don't explicitly state it, but it is implied that he was really uncomfortable around his mom.
Well, and even his own editing, he's kind of talking out loud, his thinking process behind how much do I want to say? Right. And I know there's legal proceedings coming up, that sort of thing. So he's very mindful of that. But, even he talks about Christine making him urinate all over Natalia's stuff after, she had had an accident or soiled her pants or got it on some of their stuff in this revenge sort of situation. And the immense regret and shame that this now young man feels, is so uncomfortable to watch. And he says of his mom, I felt like a Nazi following orders. now that I look back on this, and
it's very telling.
Oof.
That's very, very telling. And I'm also not implying that Jacob, even as an individual with ASD, might not have his own motivations, his own drives, and his own goals out of this. But he really does come across as a very morally centered person with a sense of shame about what he did.
Yeah.
And also questioning, like, maybe I was set up.
Yeah.
He doesn't say that, but you get the feeling that that's his thinking process.
Yeah. Having that realization about a parent, it's just, it's a very in the moment thing. And, that he's had to sort of like choose between two parents and all of that. So,
right. Choose between two parents, and the only safe version is somebody that is an unreliable narrator, over the top exaggerator. How bad must mom be if you have to go to dad as your only trustworthy source? I mean, it's very and then there's the whole microphone thing.
There's this scene where so Jacob's microphone is left on and he's at the top of the stairs talking with his dad, and so they kind of got the camera you can see their feet, but it's like you think it's going to be this big like Robert Durst moment in the Jinx,
like a revelation.
Right? And they say something and kind of mutter something about like a shotgun and someone being kicked down the stairs, but then we never find out. Like, it never pans out to anything. Like, this is lame. Like, was this supposed to be like a big bombshell where we figure out they did something horrible and never addressed again? Like, thanks. That was totally unnecessary. But now we're down to the last 2 episodes.
Right. And I promise they go fast. We're almost done. In episode 5, the viewer gets to see these clips from a forensic interview that was done back in 2019 with Natalia and a female interviewer. And it's a weird setup for an interview. I'm not going to critique too much, but I felt like I'm not given the context of the purpose of this interview. I can't really figure it out. There's not really a lot there. There are some conflicting and contradicting statements about abuse, but we really don't get much of anything. What's fascinating is Natalia is completely poised and calm. She does have like a little bit of an edge to her.
Yeah.
But by this point, she's just been living with that couple and their family for a while. And maybe they just, I don't know, maybe they just are a no nonsense couple and they struggle with obstacles. But then again, I also can't get away from the fact that, this is a very stoic little girl, totally. Or young woman, I'm not sure what it is, but you do see moments of joy of her playing with other kids.
Yeah.
Even if those kids are like a little bit younger than her, that is what always kind of takes me back to thinking that like her stoicism and her very careful discernment about who she talks to is about keeping herself safe.
Yeah. And she can let her guard down with little kids.
Right. But she's also managed to put together this well-spoken, even on the clips from Dr. Phil. She's very, very well-spoken and presents very well.
Yeah, absolutely. She's had to grow up really fast, regardless of how old she is. So then we get more interviews from Michael. I mean, again, the desperation for this man not to go to prison, it just like seethes out of this documentary. And I agree. Like, you've worked in a prison. He would probably get eaten alive in a hot second. I mean, I kind of fear for Michael's safety going to prison, but he's droning on. He's got
no containment. He cannot contain any emotions at all. No. I mean, I think of myself as a pretty highly reactive person, but even, working in prison, that shit gets, you get rid of that really quick,
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. But he really like drones on and on about all of the dirty laundry about Christine. He starts talking about.
Well, there's a lot.
Oh, there's a lot.
I mean, she's a dumbass for one thing.
But this did not need to, this had no place in here as far as I'm considered, especially.
Let's just say that, like, I think we can both agree that she's problematic, but you're saying that you don't think a lot of this necessarily has a place.
Yeah. So let me tease out a couple of things that are kind of thrown in at this last, Michael's last Hail Mary to throw her under the bus for everything and let us get glimpses of that. So first he starts talking about sexual abuse, and you think he's going into this like, okay, he's going to admit that actually he was sexually abused by his wife, and this could be a man talking about this is pretty rare.
Yeah. And
so it's like you're kind of leaned in,
like, and then set up.
Yeah, and then he's like, yeah, she would withhold sex from me when she was mad at me, and I'm like, what the okay. So then after that big letdown, he starts talking about her sexual behaviors and finding photos because, all of their stuff is still connected to the cloud. And every time she sends a sexy photo to some other guy or takes a picture of her own, he sees it. He has to be tortured by this. But they show all of these pretty graphic photos of her, either selfies she's taking in sexy like lingerie or full on like her being explicit, with a man, like sexual images where, things are, of course, blocked out, but totally unnecessary. Like,
it's unnecessary. But the thing that does make it funny is that they cut to one of the interviewees, which may be the sister. And she goes, yeah, Christine is completely technologically. She just doesn't get it.
Oh, my God. Like, what?
Like, she just had no idea that like every selfie she was taking and every record of their chat, you don't just throw away the phone. You don't just wipe it. Everything is on the cloud.
Yes, I know, but it just.
No, I agree.
I don't doubt that Christine is a terrible person. I think this was a total cheap shot, and it was incredibly sexist to show these photos of her. But again, I stand with like this is a case study on Michael, not Natalia.
Right. Again, Michael perceiving something. Again, he's perceiving like we're leaning forward, thinking that she, completely abused him, engaged in sexual assault or rape, and it's like no. She just wouldn't. She tried to coerce me with sex. If you come back, I'll have sex with you or something like. And he's framing it as if he's just completely, abused.
By this point in the documentary, I swear I was like, one more episode. Like I was so over it. I was so bored with his drama, and it just again like. All over the place. I mean, I'll save my last rant, but let's.
No. I completely support you in all of that. It is one of the interesting things that develops right now is Detective Davenport, who's the investigator for all the criminal side of this whole neglect aspect of the charges. And he's deceased, but he goes to the Ukraine to get a DNA test on Natalia's birth mom. And it is a match. It's like 99.9. They're showing you the score. It's like there is absolutely no possibility that she's not Natalia's mother. And there's footage of Biomom in the interview saying Natalia was born in 2003, meaning that she was 10 when her adopted parents, Michael and Christine, left her in the first apartment, and 13 when they moved her, and then they left the country to go to Canada, which to me is just like a slam dunk. Legally, it's not a slam dunk because a judge has proclaimed that she was 22, which is just bullshit.
And she talks about like her birth being very notable and remembering because of these really tragic situations.
Well, right. She shares that one of the Ukrainian doctors, like you can't take care of this child.
Yeah.
There's no way that you can take care of this child. And it feels kind of sketchy. I mean, certainly she's saying also this is happening while the Ukraine is being bombed. Yeah. Like she's taking part in this interview and talking very open about all these very emotional decisions. Like I wanted to take care of my child. I don't care if she had this. And I came away from this with the feeling that this was one of those things. And this is not a ding on Ukraine because this happens in every orphanage around the world, is that sometimes orphanages will like, let's take this because those Americans will, they have such big hearts or whatever. They're such patsies. They'll adopt. So
yeah, it's horrible.
Now, what we never find out though, is the connection between the skeevy adoption woman in Florida, the first family, like that was a red herring too, is like they get the name of clearly those people might even have come back with legal action and said, you don't even, we're not going to participate and don't mention us and leave us alone.
Yeah, definitely. So next to episode 6 says last one, kill me now.
Oh my God. Like literally, it's in bold. It's like literally flashing on our screen right now.
So this last episode is all about Michael's court prep and trial. And the tricky part about this trial is that Natalia's age cannot be relitigated.
Nope.
So she has to be considered her legal age at the time that the neglect took place. So again, not neglect of a child, but neglect of an adult,
a disabled person.
Yeah, an adult with a disability. And he is going to trial before Christine. So they're being tried separately. Through all of this drama, we see all this behind the scenes court prep. Michael is found not guilty. And after that, the charges against Christine end up getting dropped. I'm sure they just figured we're not going to win this based on the results of Michael's case. And they dropped the charges against her. So the kicker in this is that they do end up interviewing some of the jurors after the fact because
they are not happy.
Yeah, the jurors never knew that it was determined that Natalia most likely was a child when all of this happened. They were only allowed to know what her legal age was and that she was an older adult. So they talk about what a heartbreaking thing to find out after you made what you think is a good decision. And legally, it was dare I say, the right one, given, just the standards that are there. But that was really powerful to see, I thought.
Well, and this is also where they go back to those neighbors from the first apartment that were so skeeved out by this psychopathic adult living next to them. And they're like, now they're realizing, oh my God, she was a child.
Yeah.
And even they're starting to reframe in their minds, like, oh, her behaviors were annoying, but they're kind of childlike. And we should have seen this. And Christine is a total piece of work. When the documentary crew asks her for a comment, she replies with, your network is whack. Like, what?
Well,
okay, your network's whack.
I don't know about the network, Christine, but this documentary is whack. So I'll agree with you.
I'll give you that.
Maybe she's the smartest one in this whole thing. No. Yeah. So that's where it leaves us. And that all ended in 2022. So you discovered.
She did there's been more. I mean, it hasn't.
Yeah, of course.
This ends there. Natalia has been on Dr. Phil, which feels now very, again, not surprising, feels very exploitive, even though she handles herself very well on that as well.
But you found out that there's probably going to be a follow-up to this documentary, right?
Yeah, it looks like it hasn't been completely confirmed yet, but they're looking at basically giving a 2-hour platform to tell it from Natalia's perspective. And at first I was like, you had the kill me now. Mine was like, oh, Jeebus criminy. Yeah. Do we have to sit through another of this? And then as I read more of the article, I thought, well, no, I want her to be able to tell her story from what she can remember. One of the most tragic things about this is there are times when the documentary seems to be it seems like sometimes the documentary is framing Natalia's responses as her lying, where to me it's very clear that she comes from a traumatized background. She's been given conflictive information. Christine, even if Christine has only done 30% of what she's been alleged to do as far as feeding her information and saying this is the way you answer questions, it makes sense now looking at it through a lens that Natalia, she may not have known what the truth was at that time. So, moving forward, I don't know how that'll affect her lens today, but she seems like a poised young woman. And I'm interested in seeing what she has to say. I hope it's not exploitive. I hope it gives her a chance to share her story.
And I think at the end of this, as everyone's kind of walking out of the courtroom and stuff, I was thinking, you know what? I hope maybe civilly she can sue the shit out of them or at least get a private investigator to really comb through everything at this point. And maybe that would, lend to the civil piece of it. But I'd like to hear, in a nice, linear, non-confusing way, what she has to say as well. Yeah. So, all right. Final review, Scott.
I would say listen to this episode that we've given you and skip the doc.
There you go.
I think it's painful. I think it's painful to watch Michael. Michael needs therapy. Okay. I'm just going to tell you. There you go. Get some treatment, man. And you better get your finances in order because if she comes after you civilly, she's going to have a great case. And by the way, that judge, that guy he needs to be held accountable for this. But overall, as far as the documentary, it didn't need to be 6 episodes. It didn't need to have this level of distasteful exploitation. It could have been 3 solid episodes. It could have been really interesting without us just having to marinate in the weirdness of Michael. What's your story? Is the story about this child or is the story about a disordered adult?
Yeah. How many brains?
What about you? What do you think?
Well, how many brains are you giving it?
1.
Got it. Yeah, I really think this is a fascinating legal case. And I think it could have been done in a really tasteful way if they had not drained my soul by giving Michael so much screen time. Yeah. And approached this from more of a neutral, investigative, journalistic way. I think I could have been on board with it because even if they give us the little setup and teaser of like, is she the real life orphan? Right? Like, okay, I could get sucked into that, but make it worth my time. Make it legitimate. I felt like they were pushing a narrative that either just completely exploded and backfired, or it made the Barnetts look horrible. And then it ends up at the end, taking you all these twists and turns, but at the end, then you just like, okay, we have all this empathy for Natalia.
Right.
So it was just salacious, kind of blows your mind at first, and it's got the buzz and everyone's talking about it, but then it gets mindless. And I don't know. I thought it was trash. We've reviewed some bad docs, but I feel like this is the first one I regret picking because now we're giving it more attention. So I like what you said, though. I think that this is a fascinating legal case. This is a very interesting abuse. It's just the Michael factor. Mm-hmm. This is like, without getting in trouble for diagnosing, the relationship between Michael and Christine is very reminiscent of a very common dynamic between certain types of personalities, except that we usually see it flipped. We usually see a narcissistic male and a borderline female. Or at least that's what the media, that's what sort of our culture presents to us. And here, again, I'm not diagnosing them, but there are some real traits that come through. Sure.
At least, but then again, you've got an unreliable narrator. So it's really hard to discern what's actually going on. And then the people that you want to trust, like Christine's attorney, was such a jackass.
He was
such an unprofessional jackass.
Absolutely. God, so defensive. I mean, where's your thick skin as a, defense attorney? But I put down 1.5 brains because I think the story has so much potential. Is so interesting. Anyway, there we go. We yet again did it for you. And I'm sure most people watched it. So they're like, you're not doing us any favors. We sat through it too. But there's our 2 cents. You asked for it. So, all right, Dr. Scott, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shiloh.
We'll see you next time, everyone, on LA
Not So
Confidential. Bye, guys.
Bye, folks.
We sincerely thank you for spending some time with us today. LA Not So Confidential is part of the Crawlspace Media Network in partnership with Glassbox Media. Each episode is hosted, produced, and written by Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh. Our post-production editing and sweetening magic is handled by the multi-talented Jason Usry of Ear Cult Productions.
The LA Not So Confidential theme, entitled Cool Vibes Film Noir, is composed and performed by the talented Kevin MacLeod. He graciously allows us to use his music via a Creative Commons attribution license, and you can check out all of Kevin's amazing work on YouTube.
All of the resources for each episode can be found on our website at la-not-so-confidential.com. You can find us on Instagram at LA Not So Podcast, on Twitter at LA Not So Pod, and on Facebook at LA Not So Confidential. Media inquiries and bookings are scheduled at alienistentertainment@gmail.com.
Please join us each month on Saturdays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for a live streaming and very interactive broadcast on YouTube entitled Behind the Couch. Stay tuned to all of our social media for our live streaming scheduling announcements.
Subscribe to LA Not So Confidential so you never miss a new episode. And lastly, we'd be honored if you joined our Patreon at patreon.com/LA Not So Podcast. With a subscription, you get an ad-free listening experience, and you'll be the first notified about upcoming live events, social gatherings, and super cool swag coming your way.
Thanks for listening, and join in with us next time on LA
Not So
Confidential. Bye, folks.